I guess we'll get started. I'm Jason Nestor, and I'm going to be talking today about deception. So I'm going to be talking mostly about using deception for early detection. Deception is a very broad subject. It's something I really love, but I'm just going to look at it purely from the lens of that early detection of an active attacker on your network, and then I'll come back around to talk a little bit about possibly using deception out on the DMZ, out on the internet, to sort of separate the general junk, the general noise on the internet from the active attacker, and trying to make that a little bit more easy to catch. So yeah, trolling the attacker, being a puppet master, kind of controlling that engagement. Quick thing about me, so yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. I've been in IT since '98, started off as a Novell engineer, NT, AS400, from there, I went to system or application development. I've been a DBA, I've been a VMware admin, I've been a storage admin, and finally ended up in security, and I've done my best to make a career of that. But yep, right now I'm getting ready to start a new position next week, and super excited about that. So moving on, what is deception? So deception is, from my standpoint, it's just creating information technology objects that have no real value to the organization, but are realistic enough to trick an attacker into thinking they're legitimate, and then monitoring for things accessing that. So it's a great way of using the fact that you're on your home turf and you know what's legitimate in your network to trick an attacker into giving away their presence on your network. The biggest thing is it needs to look real enough to fool an attacker, but not so real that your actual users start using it. I would also add, because it keeps me up at night when I'm deploying deception in an enterprise, it needs to be safe enough that you're not giving an attacker a vulnerable box on your network for them to exploit, because my God, how embarrassing would that be? And it's a great way of playing games with attackers and making them punch walls. One of my highlights of my career was getting a red teamer that I truly respect to swear at me. After he spent months on my network and just couldn't get anywhere, and finally he decided to move vertically in the network, and we caught him within 30 seconds and sent him a picture of his Dropbox, and it's like, mother! That's good stuff. You know, we always talk about in InfoSec about the rock stars of the red team and how fun it is for them to come in and be all cool and no lunch until I get domain admin on your network. And defense never gets that kind of stuff, right? I mean, you never get to be cool. This, to me, is cool. Putting a little bit of egg on the faces of your red team, that's fun. So why would you bother? So a little story. Used to be part of a large retail company. Yeah, if you want to know more about me, there's a social network for businesses you can look me up on. But I used to be part of a retail company that was part of a very large investment firm, and we would have monthly meetings of all the InfoSec people. And one of the InfoSec guys that I really respect, and I thought he was great, but he made this comment one day about, well, let's face it, if you get a good attacker on your network, it's game over, you're done. Which I derailed this entire meeting for like 45 minutes, saying that's nonsense. I mean, they're on your network. This is game on at that point, in my opinion. Because you know what's real, your users know what's real, they know where they should go, and they're not looking around. The attacker doesn't. As soon as they get on your network, it's up to them to be as quiet as they can. So the more you lead them the path you want them to take, the more likely they are to trip your sensors, and you know that they're there. It's a great way of using attacker tools against themselves. One of my favorite things to do as an InfoSec professional is to watch presentations of red teamers that I respect who do a great job of telling how they do their jobs, or watching pen testers in action and just seeing what tools they're using and what they're doing today. And in the back of my head, I'm just thinking, all right, well, how would I trip that up? How would I trip that up? How would I trip that up? So, I mean, I have a laundry list of, here's the tools I know attackers are using right now, or I've seen videos of people using these. How would I give those tools what they're looking for, but it's what I want them to see? So it's a really fun way of letting them use their own tools for their own demise. Slows down attackers. We love to talk about dwell time on a network. The more of this crap you put on your network, the harder it is for an attacker to move. It sets that tempo really slow on them. So, when you get to the point where, yeah, they've been on your network for 180 days, but they haven't been able to do squat because they're scared to move. Again, that's good stuff. And mislead them with fake news. You know, we're talking Russian disinformation here. It's so much stuff on your network, so much crud, that they just don't know what to trust. And I did a Google image search for fake news, and Oompa Loompa came up. You can figure out why that is. I don't know. So why would you bother? It's inexpensive. Everything I'm going to talk about today is free. There are certainly some really cool vendors. There's people who represent vendors that do deception in the room today. There are super cool vendors that do really neat stuff here, but you can do a lot of deception for free, and it's easy, it's cheap. Low false positive. If you do it right, there really should be no reason for deception to get triggered. It should get to the point that if one of your deception boxes does get triggered, it should be a pretty obvious, everyone stop, go see what the heck that was. So you need to be careful with it and make sure you don't put too much out there that is too close to reality, but it's one of those things that in a normal environment, as long as you are careful, this could be one of those few things that you have that just doesn't waste your time. I mean, how many people here spend a lot of time chasing down IDS events that are useless? I know I do. So that's one of the things I love about deception. It's just, there's no impact. It's unexpected. Red teamers tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't get the impression that many organizations are doing this. When I have pen testers come in, it's always a, oh, well, hell, that's going to be fun. So I think they are catching on. I think more organizations are doing it, and I'm seeing tools coming out from the red team side of trying to detect when deception's in play, and certainly a lot more focus on trying to stay stealthy. But I mean, it's hard. So when someone comes in, especially at a big old corporation, they're expecting to walk in and launch responder and have you in 2 days or in 20 minutes, something like that. And when they walk in and it's just pure deception, I don't think they expect it. And again, it's a ton of fun. It really is. Okay, so I apologize. Anyone who's seen Dave Kennedy speak in the last 2 years has probably seen this 40 times now. But I do love this slide, or this Twitter conversation. So essentially Jeremiah up top is saying that an adversary only needs to find one vulnerability to gain a foothold, and they just need to find one system that the target doesn't know that they have, which for a big company, how hard is that? But then Egypt replies accurately with counterpoint. Once you're on a system, adversary roles reverse, blue team only needs to find one IOC to catch red, which I think is just screams in my mind deception. I mean, just give them as many IOCs as you can, or ways to trigger IOCs. All right, I'm gonna keep herping here. You can sort of read that. So this is just one of my favorite webcomics, and it's great since we're gonna be talking about compliance today too. But it was one of those silly perception versus reality things. So I think this just represents enterprises really well. Upper left-hand corner, you got the PhD who's talking over everyone's head about cool buzz terms that isn't practical, nothing really exists. Upper right, you have a vendor talking to CISO about some six-figure box that's going to solve all the problems, and CISO's, well, let's install it. And you got the compliance guy who's quoting regulations or requirements that your attackers also know those requirements, so let's make sure we're following our open playbook. And then of course the C level saying we passed compliance, we have antivirus, we've got insurance, quit wasting money. On the right hand side, you have the actual pen tester who has access on the network, and his buddy asks him, well, how did you get on there? Well, they weren't looking for me. And at least in my experience with enterprises, this is super accurate. We all have kind of the same playbooks. We follow the same frameworks. We're NIST. We have the same tools. We're Palo Alto shop or Cisco shop or what have you. And it's a small pool of defenses out there. And the attackers know that too. I mean, how many people have had a pen tester come in and launch an Nmap and say, this goes by every IDS we've ever seen? It happens, and it's because they have access to these same tools. So I think defense needs to shake things up and needs to do the unexpected now and again. And again, deception is not terribly expected. All right. So it's not all great. If you aren't careful, you can confuse your users and have them start using your deception stuff. It's a bad day if you have a fake file server out there and you realize that your end users and marketing have started using that because they have more space than the production file server. And yeah, and you're not backing that up. So it can be dangerous. Externally facing deception stuff on the internet, you might ruin your corporate image. Someone starts sending you links to Shodan searches saying, you guys see how vulnerable you are? And it's all bunkus, it's all fake, but they don't know that, and I've been on the receiving end of that. It can be a tough sell in some organizations. What I've experienced are orgs saying, well, deception's kind of a new thing, that's kind of top of the pyramid stuff, we're nowhere near there in the maturity level, and we're still trying to lock down lateral movement. Okay, I get it, but I don't see what you have to lose, but it can be a tough thing to sell, and it's kind of hard for some folks to get conceptually. So if you're passionate about it, you can go to bat, but you might get some pushback. And the boring bullet point of it's no substitute for good basic security practices, nothing is. I think, yeah, you gotta get your house in order. This is not a conclusive list. This is not Jason Nestor's list of everything you need to do, and if you do these, you're secure. These are things that if you're gonna do deception, at least free deception, I think you need to have these things in place because they open up where you can stick your deception easily. So first and foremost, you need centralized logging. If you don't have that, deception, it's all based on alerting. You have to trigger an alert, and you have to get that alert. The best way to do that is with centralized logging, and you should just have centralized logging. It's important. Don't need anything fancy. A simple elk stack, Graylog, Windows Event Forwarding, great stuff. I love Graylog. If you got some money, super duper fancy SIM is always great. You know, if you get Splunk, I got my Splunk sticker. Splunk. I have nothing like it. I do believe there's some representatives of a fantastic MSSP in the room who would love to sell you some business and some deception too while you're at it. But yeah, I mean, have some way of getting those alerts and getting those logs to you. And then shut down an attacker's easy wins. Again, going back to that no lunch before domain admin, shut down some of this stuff. Insecure enabled by default CRUD. You know, Windows never stops doing things. So NetBIOS, LLMNR, WPAD, WDigest, all that stuff, make sure that crap is shut down. Because once you have that stuff shut down, and you know attackers are expecting that stuff to be alive, you can use that to your advantage. Prevent stupid passwords like Winter 2019. Everyone knows why that's a common password. All right, I can explain. So Windows complexity, Winter 2019 would meet the Windows complexity requirement. That is typical length of a password policy that would comply with that. A lot of corporations have 90-day password expirations, which happens to align with the seasons of the year. So you get Winter 2019, Summer 2019, Fall 2019, or Autumn 2019. So you know, an attacker just wants to do some password spraying. Chances are right now you would see some Winter 2019. If you make sure that that's not a valid password in your environment, you can all of a sudden create deceptive user accounts that have that password and lead them astray. Turn on your bloody host firewalls, please. So what I always experience with this is companies try to boil the ocean with host firewalls, and they go, well, this desktop user needs to be able to access these 15 servers, and that one needs to access these 3 servers. Don't do that. Very simple Windows firewall rule. If you have a workstation VLAN and a server VLAN, your workstations don't need to talk to your workstation. So an inbound and outbound rule saying this workstations can't talk to the workstation VLAN and can't receive communication from workstation VLAN shuts down so much CRUD. It's 2 firewall rules on the Windows firewall deployed by GPO. And again, it stops so much of the attack, and then you can use fake stuff that is open to that. And you know, someone pops on your network and they're in your workstation VLAN, they see a ton of fake honeypots out there, and they think, oh cool, I have access to stuff on this network. Everything else is shut down. Labs or ships, this is the local admin password service stuff. Just cool way of making sure you have unique passwords on all of your endpoints. Ships is a trusted sex solution in the same space, which if you're a PCI corporation, you might want to look at that, because Labs is interesting in that it doesn't encrypt the password, which I don't see how that passes PCI inspection, although I've never seen a PCI auditor complain. Anyways. Okay, so Peter Kim's pen testing standard. This is, Peter Kim's the author of the Hacker Playbook. This is his method of running a pen test. It's loosely based off the pen testing execution standard. I throw it out here just because, you know, just like we use NIST on the defense side or something along those lines, or we have our compliances and, you know, the attackers know our playbook, we have a bit of their playbook too, right? I think this is, depending on what your objectives are, this is kind of consistent of what an attack is going to look like. And in my opinion, every one of these has a spot where we could use deception to throw them off. persistence is a little bit tricky, but I think most of these you can do deception. So when I look at this, I look at it and say, all right, well, how would I use deception to throw off intelligence gathering, or make sure that that initial foothold is maybe not where they're thinking they're getting a foothold. So I'll kind of come back to this. All right. So what I thought I would do is just go over some like a 2 billion mile height of some attack situations or scenarios, and then where I would put deception to catch it very early on. So I'm finally getting to the deception. I'm done selling you now, and I'm going to give you examples. So scenario 1 is foreign device on the network. So someone has tailgated their way into your environment, and they've dropped a Dropbox on your network somewhere. You don't have 802.1x or NAC, which would be nice, but so they're on your network, but they don't have credentials. They're not domain joined. They're just trying to figure out what they can go from there. This is my story earlier of getting a red team attacker to swear at me. This was their scenario. So goals for an attacker in this environment: mapping the network, finding credentials, looking for weak spots, looking for open file shares, things like that. Trying to figure out what they can do now that they're on your network. Every one of these has a spot where we can play with them. So one of the first things I would expect an attacker to do here is try to use DNS to their advantage, do some reverse DNS lookups, see what other devices are on the network. So defenders right now might be saying, well, yeah, that's cool. I should probably have something in my SIM saying single source IP on my network doing a ton of DNS lookups, because you have DNS going to your logging, right? There's no head nodding, that's sad. Anyway, so one source IP doing a lot of DNS lookups, that should trigger an alert. Yes, and that absolutely you should have that, but it's a race condition. What's your threshold there? 5 DNS lookups in 2 minutes? If I have a box on your network and I don't think I'm going to be detected, I could take months. So where do you trip that up? So you can't rely on that. But one thing you could rely on is just having a ton of DNS records that are bunkus and should never actually be requested. You set up some blocks in you set your DHCP scope to block off a pile of addresses in all your subnets, assign some DNS, some A records to those, and record those in your SIM or your log management, and if you have like a lookup table. And anytime you see someone actually request those addresses, trigger an alert and try to figure out, well, who did that and why. This stuff trips people up so quickly because you don't expect that. Like, oh, I just did a DNS lookup. That's more or less passive, and boom, you got them. It's also, I'll say this a few times in different places, stuff like this is a really cool way of finding people at your company who are maybe those diamonds in the rough. Like I found a couple people on our help desk who were just out there playing and experimenting. So first you run like, hey, what the hell's going on? And then talk to them, like, oh, cool, come with me, let's go talk. Stuff like this is kind of fun in that way. A little added advantage. Then one left to my Cure photo. Makes me sad. That's Robert Smith from The Cure. All right. All right. Another way of doing it. So Nmap. Again, pen testers coming in and they're always so proud of their Nmap scripts that, no IDS that we know of can catch this. Which, yeah, they're very good at that. But honeypots, the more the better. So just devices sitting on your internal network that have no reason to exist except for to let you know that someone connected to them. So I list here artillery, which is, I believe, originally written by Dave Kennedy, is now maintained by our friends over at Binary Defense. So the thing I run into when I talk to people about honeypots is concern about expense. Well, you tell me you want 1,000 of these things, so I guess we have some old laptops we can use. It all comes down to what you want to accomplish. If you want like a full honeypot type network with like real applications, real servers, I want a full SQL database and yada yada yada, yeah, that's a pain in the butt. If all you want is a box that listens and tells you someone connects to it, I have a solution for you. I did lie, I said everything I was going to talk about is free, but it's practically free. Here's your honeypot, cheap Raspberry Pis. Grab these guys, put them, 200 IP addresses on them. I actually had to look it up. I think from what I was reading, someone got 4,000 IPs on Raspberry Pi running Linux before it just exploded into flames. So all those DNS all those DNS reservations you did in the last one, assign those addresses to a Raspberry Pi, put artillery on it. So what artillery is, it's just a simple script that listens on ports that you configure. So open up ports that would be expected to be found, some that they'll probably look for, 445, 3389, 22, 1433, those sorts of things. And if anyone ever connects to them, it pops out to a text file, the source IP address of that device that connects to it. You have that picked up, go to your centralized logging, and alert. And this is a $40 solution to get 4,000 honeypots on your network. Someone goes and launches an Nmap scan on your network, and good luck missing that. I can't talk enough about this. This is such a simple solution, and what's that?
Sorry, saying it'll catch on fire at facilities.
Okay, well, don't put 4,000 addresses on it. Yeah. Yeah, I should have asked at the beginning, is anyone doing deception, aside from binary defense, is anyone doing deception in there? Yeah? What are you doing?
I have used Rapid7's product and honeypots built into it.
What product do they have? Oh, sorry, I'll talk to you after that. We shouldn't talk products at NEOISF.
File server resource man.
Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, this is, honestly, I don't see why you wouldn't do this. This is just so cool. Other stuff, Responder. So every pen test I've seen in the last 5 years, I don't know, how long has Responder been around? Pen tester comes in, plugs in, launches a terminal, launches Responder, minimizes the terminal, says I'll check on that later. So first of all, shut that nonsense down. LMNR, NetBIOS, name server, kill all that nonsense. Set up your firewalls, block it. Most companies can do this with zero impact. NetBIOS might cause issues with some seriously legacy crap, but that should be few and far between. You should be able to set firewalls to segment that stuff as much as possible. Once you have that, again, get your Raspberry Pi out, and there's a great little utility here called Responder. All this thing does is every 5 minutes launches as an LMNR request and lets you know if something responds. So it costs you nothing, have it running. Someone comes in, puts Responder on your network, you'll catch them within 5 minutes. Again, this is kind of an interesting way of catching someone playing around your network. That might be someone you might want to start mentoring. But there you go. Okay, so by this time, I hope to God you've already caught them, because when an attacker gets to this point, they're done with being quiet. But things like RAR, Eyewitness, so these are things that scan web ports and take screenshots of all the landing pages, the front pages, and puts them on a nice little thing. They can scroll through it. I love to feed them stuff to get them salivating. So ancient Tomcat pages, Tomcat admin pages, I mean, they're like tripping over themselves to get to that stuff. Insecure Jenkins, the Groovy script stuff, DVR pages, because no one ever changes the admin page for your webcams and things like that. Printers, put some of that stuff up there and watch them play. Again, chances are you've already caught them long for that. All right, I'll be honest, I do this purely for the pen tester's benefit. For an actual live attacker, God hopes you've caught them long before they decide to be this loud, but this is fun to play around with your pen testers. Fake file servers, also super useful. So SMB v1, unsigned SMB, and just open shares. Fill them up with lots of documents that look like social security numbers might be present, things like that, like Cobra documents, and watch them play. And again, so much artillery. It's such a simple solution. Okay. Trolling level 1000. So other things, if you do have a NAC or 8021X, you have some sort of method. One, congratulations if you actually got that working. But what folks do, if they have that running, is someone plugs in a foreign device, they either shut down that port, put them in a quarantine network, or put them on guest, which is cool. That's awesome. On the other hand, you are letting the attacker know that you're already onto them, and they're going to get the heck out of there. I would recommend that if you're going to do this, go ahead and throw some of these Raspberry Pis in that network as well. Give them a quarantine network and feed them some deception to let them sit there and linger a bit and give you enough time to hopefully track them down and maybe see what they're doing, maybe get some law enforcement involved before they run out the door, maybe get a taser involved. If you have this technology, if they're on a quarantine network, what's it hurt you to let them stick around for a while? Deception Wi-Fi, you could do the same thing here. So if you have a NEOISF SSID, maybe have a NEOISF corp that is just, with a simple password, let people fall into that, and oh cool, I got on a corporate wireless network, beat it with deception. Just a note, you will probably end up with actual employees trying to get on that network, so you have to tell them what the real one is. And then deception Active Directory domains. I've done this on my actual internal network, just had another AD domain, I've even done one-way trust with it. Just to make it really hard to detect what is reality here, what is fake. Watching an attacker fool around with a domain that does nothing at the end of the day, it's cool. All right, so another scenario. Now, so that was a foreign device on my network. They had nothing to start off with. Let's say they actually compromised the system on my network, trusted system, so they have an active login, it's domain joined, so a lot of that hunting and searching is off the table. So if you have a good attacker, they're going to try to be quiet. They're going to see what they have on the system, what they can use already, and they have no reason to search as hard. So I have some attacker goals here, and red teamers, if I'm completely full of it, please tell me. But determine what they have access to, both on the network and locally. Maybe escalate permissions if they have the ability to. Try to establish permanence, enumerate move. Other things you might do is check the health of the system, see if that system reboots constantly. So I mentioned this because you could do things like change system uptime, maybe feed some false logs that make it look like the system behaves differently than what they're expecting. It's kind of outside the scope, but anyways. So they're on my system. One of the things I'm going to do, and this really isn't deception, although I can make some cases here, is just watch certain commands. So everyone's doing command line logging along with their DNS logging. So you know the commands that are being executed on your network, on your endpoints? No? All right. I fully recommend it. It's super useful. I know SIMs are expensive, says the guy with the Splunk sticker on his laptop. You don't need to do that. Elk and Greylog are brilliant for this. But look for the commands that just your standard users have no reason to use, and an attacker might find them to be super useful. This used to be a way more useful control. Metasploit it does most things in memory via the API. They don't launch commands as much as they used to, but still, you might catch some stuff here. So I list like, who am I? Netsh. How do you guys pronounce it? I always pronounce it Netsh. You say NetSH. NetSH. Should we do a survey, a poll? All right, reg or reg?
Reg.
Reg. All right. I always say reg. Yeah, minority. But these commands that Bill down in county has no reason why he would ever run this. So if all of a sudden you see Bill's user ID, you run these commands, I think that's worthy of a call. I think that's worthy to go check out what's going on with Bill. And then again, it's another great way of finding those diamonds in the rough. So a couple links here. The top one, that's from Mo Advar, and I apologize to Mo if I am totally botching his name. So this guy runs a website called Living Off the Land Binaries and Scripts. What he has is a list of, an awesome list of common or built-in commands that can be used for nefarious purposes, that can be useful to someone who has a foothold on a system. And when possible, he also has detection mechanisms. Fully recommend you consume that thing and keep an eye on it. You find all sorts of great gold in those hills. And then, from a defense standpoint, you look at that stuff and you say, oh yeah, I never thought about that command, but I should totally know if someone ever runs that thing. The second link, this is from the Japan CERT. It's a little bit older, but it's such cool research. So what they did is they looked at all their incident responses for the year of 2016, I believe it was. Yep, 2016. And looked at what commands they saw attackers use at what parts of the attack scenario. And they just indexed it. And so what they gave us then was this awesome list of, yeah, an attacker has a foothold in your system, here's how they're going to just figure out what they have access to. Here's how they're going to gain permanence, or persistence. And I fully recommend you take a look at it, because maybe like 2 commands in that list is something you would ever see an end user run, truly. So I strongly recommend you look at that. Stepping back a little ways, looking at arguments, so if you're logging command lines, you're also logging command line arguments. Look at those lowest common denominators. /add, /domain, /delete is what I mentioned here. Forget the command itself. it should be pretty interesting if you see an end user launch a command with a /domain at the end, or a /header, or /delete, or things along those lines. Just getting an alert on that, you're going to get probably very few false positives, and catch some pretty interesting stuff there. So like, someone's playing obfuscation games, and they're going around reg, but looking at just /add, that's a very broad net to cast, and again, it's very unlikely that your end users are going to do anything with that. String symbols, who knows what a caret does in DOS in the command prompt? Yeah, so basically nothing, right? So if I do a dir, I get a directory listing. If I do a di-r, I get a directory listing. It's a great way of just, if someone's doing very bog standard detection of commands being executed, throw a caret in my command. But just why is there a caret in your command to begin with? So just alerting on that is probably a really useful control. Lots of ampersands or lots of plus signs. So if someone's doing some sort of obfuscation and concatenation of strings, so there's always these cat and mouse games of obfuscating, but I just take a step back and go, if I have 3 ampersands in a command line, something's weird here, and I should look. Also, this is kind of a cool way of catching people using passwords or passing passwords from the command line, especially if you look for exclamation marks. Guarantee you'll probably find people who are establishing a -p in their password. And then super long commands. So like if you look at poor Mr. Kennedy, who spends his entire life just getting unicorn around Windows Defender through various obfuscation things, the one thing that's always consistent is that command's like this freaking long. Should you ever have a command that freaking long being launched? So if you're logging command lines, take a look at those command line lengths, and if it's over 100 characters or so, maybe you want to get an alert on that. All right. Back to deception, I apologize for that. So I'm on your box, I'm trying to figure out what I can do from here. One thing they might start looking for is credentials. So give them some credentials. Top couple commands here, which by the way, looking for command key and vault command would be 2 other great things to alert on. But those are just adding things to the Windows credential store. Put stuff like that in your login scripts, and just inject fake stuff into your Windows credential store for people to pull down and look at. You record that on your side. You know what commands or what logins you've injected. You look for that stuff being used on your network. The 2 links below, Honeybase is freaking cool. It's basically, it automates this, but it does so much more. I totally encourage you to look at it. And also inject stuff in the memory in the LSAS, so you can fool around with WCE and Mimikatz. But it'll do things like inject passwords and registry for things like PuTTY I have down there. It'll load up a system with credentials. That again, if you know what those credentials are and you're logging properly, you start looking for people using that elsewhere in your environment, and you see it, you got them. Last 2 links are Kippo and Cowrie. These are 2 low-yield SSH servers for deception. So they accept SSH connections and kind of fool around with the attacker, answering commands falsely. Meanwhile, it's recording everything that they're doing, so you can learn a little bit about what an attacker might do if they get SSH on one of your boxes, while you casually go and find them and tap them on the shoulder and ask them to stop, politely, with a taser. All right. So other things an attacker might do once they have access to a box in your network is see what files are on it. So there's a few things you could do here. Canary files, so this link here, canarytokens.org, it's a super cool site. They have a ton of different tokens that you can build. And what they do is, you go and say, so for this example, I want a canary file. So I want a Word doc that if someone opens it, it's going to call home. So it has like a tracking pixel on it. And it'll call it to Canary Tokens, and you configure and say, if you ever see this tracking pixel get loaded, send me an email with this information, tell me what Word doc that was. And it's a super, super simple thing you could do. Go create a bunch of them and just throw them on your local systems. Or build your own, because, Canary Tokens is fairly popular, so I think a lot of attackers are fairly hip to it. But build your own. Did you know that if you just take an HTML file and give it a .doc extension, Word will open it normally, and display it. So it's a really, really easy way of making a tracking pixel. Just make a simple HTML file that calls an image, like a PHP script out externally. I actually use this for phishing campaigns when I want to track documents being opened in like a Google App Shop, where people open it in the built-in Google Viewer, and a lot of companies will encourage people to do that if they're not sure on it, because you're probably not going to affect someone from the built-in Google Viewer. But if you do this, Google can't open it; it just shows an error, so it tells them to download the file, so it gets around that. But yeah, so having these things here, it's also, I have here, it could be useful for ransomware detection if you're super fast. So you have this file, you have these files here that are, I'm sorry, I'm saying this about order. So just having some files in general, right? That it doesn't have to have a tracking pixel, but just files you put on your system that you know about that have no actual value, and since you're doing your logging, a modification of that file sets off an alert. So you can put this at the root of your user profile, where your user is less likely to go to, or do it as a training exercise and put it in the actual documents folder, but train your users to know that these files are there for other purposes. I would say ransomware, because they'll be more likely to understand that. But yeah, and then just track and alert if someone ever accesses those files. Does that make sense? Yeah, please.
In our testing, with the air files specifically, if you have a CIF share, or you have antivirus that scans your file shares,
Yeah,
it's going to hit off all those.
that's interesting.
And, I mean, at least with the free version, I'm sure maybe the paid version. Because it's scanning the file.
Yeah. So I admit it's been a while since I've.
And the antivirus will actually, depending on what your antivirus is, you'll get some random AWS IPs to the location, because your antivirus is probably scanning it offline or something, or on there.
So it's been a while since I've had to administer an AV solution that did file scanning. But yeah, I can see that.
Or
So-
a CIF share, if you do certain types of, depending on your SANs and your file shares work.
Gotcha. So that might be a reason, though, to build your own, where you might be able to build in a little bit more controls to it and maybe detect what's causing it and ignore some of that stuff. No, that's a good call out. Thank you.
Yeah, it would be, if you made it yourself, it'd be easy to.
Yeah.
Although at least you know when the scans run.
This is true. I got 10,000 alerts. I guess AV's working. That's cool. All right, so this is a little bit more fun. Drive mappings. So getting to a more full-fledged honeypot, building out a simple file server, Samba Share, or simple Windows 2008, 12, 16, whatever file server, purely for deception. So what I like to do is just build out a simple Windows file server, run a quick script to pull all the file names off of my legitimate file servers and directories, and then just fill them with bunkus to give them some weight, some file sizes, and then just monitor access of those files. And then what I'll do is I'll create drive mappings on all my endpoints to those file servers. So this little registry fun here, this is actually hiding it from the GUI, so your end users won't see these drive mappings and start fiddling around, but it will still show up, like if you do a net use from the command prompt, for example, you'll see these drive mappings. So it's just a simple D-word value, no drives, and it's kind of interesting. So the drive mapping letters are powers of 2, so 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, blah, 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 blah. So you have an end drive, you want to hide that, you create this D-word value, give it an 8192 decimal value, and now anything mapped to N on that end user system will not actually show up in the Windows GUI. Again, it will still show up from the command prompt, so if someone has access to that box, they'll see that that drive mapping is there, but your end user should ignore it. And for this, where you're logging, do not log on access for this stuff, because just the act of drive mapping it, that Monday morning when people come and plug in their laptops, enjoy. You're going to get a lot of alerts. You want to do it based on actual file access and modification. But this is another really great catch, and it could also be useful for ransomware. So what I'll do with this is, so say my drive mappings typically are like I and J, I'll bookend them, so I'll do like an H and a K. One for just humans will probably start alphabetically. Ransomware tends to start alphabetically or reverse alphabetically, so they'll hopefully catch one of those first, and I'll bookend my important stuff. And the last thing there is making a recursive recursive directory, so it just keeps calling itself. This is fun to do because if I do like a directory search from an interpreter shell, this will hang it. So I go looking for a specific type of file on one of my deceptive file shares, and I hit this recursive file share, they're stuck. And if you disconnect that shell, it'll keep running. So hopefully the end user eventually will go, Jesus, what the hell is this system doing? Feel free to do this in your user profile as well, but this is kind of a fun little thing to do. And I don't know, I've certainly never tried it, but I would suspect that there's certain ransomware that might get caught in this little web here as well, and just sit there and spend all weekend so you don't have to miss your barbecue in January. So, then Active Directory. So if I have access to a box that's on the network and joins to the domain, I'm certainly dumping AD, or playing around with it at least. So nothing really new under the sun here, but simple stuff, and you might as well do it. So cribble roasting, of course, is a thing. So play with those SPNs, create some fake SPNs, and make sure your SIM or your managed provider knows that you've done this and that they call home as soon as they see something used with these. So create your SPN, give it an admin count of 1 just to make it even more interesting. Give an SPN of a fake service account. I always stick with SQL servers because those tend to be common. And 4769 is a requesting of a cribble roast ticket. So start watching for those event IDs with your fake SPNs. And again, you should never actually see them in use, and if you see them in use, you know you got something fun going on. And then just make fake objects. You know what your objects look like. You know what your layout is like. So if you're doing privileged accounts and standard user accounts, as you should be, you know, your normal user accounts, and then your admins, for example, have an ADM underscore or an exclamation mark in their username or priv or whatever. If you know you're doing that, also create a different version of it. So if my username is ADM underscore JNester for my privileged account, I'll also create an exclamation mark JNester, and that account doesn't do anything. If the group that gives everyone admin access to the endpoints is ADM endpoints, then I'll create an admin endpoints and make those users part of that group. So anyone searching Active Directory really doesn't have a clear indicator as to what is those privileged accounts and what is just bunkus. And then again, monitor. If someone starts trying to play around with that priv account or exclamation mark account, something weird is going on and you should be tracking them down. And then fake domain admins. First of all, everyone gets alerts if domain admin gets used in your environment. Again, I would totally recommend that. Domain admin should be such a rare usage in an environment that if someone actually logs in with it, everyone who has the ability to log with domain admin should probably get an email saying, yo, who did that and why? But create some fake ones. Legitimately add them to domain admin or enterprise admin, schema admin, administrators. Depending on your risk tolerance, give them ridiculous passwords or give them simple passwords. So really encourage people to try to use them. Prevent logins, set login hours to nothing or log on to nothing, or use GPO to say that they can only log into one specific system, things like that. And then just watch for usage attempts. So my example here, I use old cruft, like SQL admins or vCenter admins, things that you tend to see in older organizations that some cavalier admin came in when they first set up VMware 3.5, and it's my vCenter admin. I just log on to my desktop with that, and I just add it to domain admin because I didn't have to think about it. And you see that all the time, so use that sort of bad behavior to your advantage. All right, and now for something completely different. So I'm going to move into the internet. Am I okay for time? Cool. Any questions internally? Am I boring you guys? No. Appreciate that. The few people who shook their heads, I appreciate it. All right, so the internet. Things change a little bit on the internet. So internally, you sure the hell hope that there isn't a lot of just cruft and people are just scanning your network at all times and setting off alarms. On the internet, that's reality. So having boxes that are just out there on the internet and alerting on people doing silly things, you're gonna have a bad time with that. So in my mind, the goal of deception on the internet is to separate the script kiddies and the bored people from the actual active attackers and try to get that signal removed from the noise. So I had something that I was doing and it was really fun. I was going to go over that now. So I'll make sure I have it. Yep, okay. So let the trolling begin. So very similar to artillery is this sweet package called port spoof. And what this thing does is, their intention is that you would put it on your legitimate servers and have it listen on every port that is not being used by your legitimate server. So if you have a web server that's listening on 443, you have port spoof also running that's listening on 1 to 442 and 444 to 65,000, blah, blah, blah. And it actually responds. So if I connect to it on 23, it'll give me what looks like a telnet prompt, or at least a banner. And the whole idea is that it makes scanning someone's environment really irritating. It's hard to find out what's legitimate. I'll admit I've never been brave enough to use it that way. The whole idea to me of taking a production server and telling it to listen on every single port and not putting a firewall in front of it, I'm just too chicken for that. What I did do is I used this for unused external IP addresses in an organization. So most companies have a block of IP addresses, and most companies aren't using them all. See IPv4 exhaustion. So since you have these IP addresses that aren't doing bumkis, what I did is I natted them all to a single physical server, isolated that physical server from the network again because I'm scared. So in case that box did get compromised, they couldn't do anything with it. Set a port spoof on it and told it to listen to everything. This is really fun, actually, because one, depending on your parameters, doing an nmap scan on this thing could take like 8 to 12 hours per IP address. So where I did this at, there was slightly more than 1,000 IP addresses. So that's a fun way of just slowing people down. It makes bad IPs very obvious. So, I mean, this makes it pretty clear when someone's just up to no good and just running a crummy scan. It kind of brings it up to the top. And just the sort of thing I did, so to make it harder for people to determine that I was doing this, I gave everything a DNS record. The Harvester, a good OSINT tool, has a master word list of just common subdomains you'll see out on the internet. OWA, link, Skype, blah, 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 blah. So I just went through that, removed anything that we were actually using legitimately, and produced DNS records for all these IP addresses I was using. So when someone went to go against our domain, they had no idea what was real and what was fake. And of course, your end users, they know. I mean, you told them you go to portal.neoisf.org. That's where you go, or VPN, or OWA, or whatever. But an attacker has no clue. And another tool. Okay, it is Spider Trap. So Spider Trap just creates a little web labyrinth. It just generates links and links and links and links, and you click on it and it just keeps going forever. It's meant to catch web crawlers. But it's actually kind of fun to do with this, so I put this on the same box with port spoof. I just told them not to listen on 80 and 443 and let Spider Trap do it. It's a really interesting way of seeing what sort of WordPress compromises are out there today, because all of a sudden you'll see a ton of URIs hitting this box of various WordPress admin pages and strange query strings. Like, oh, I wonder what they found. So this is kind of fun to watch. And it's fun to watch that guy fall. All right, so what's this look like? Here's a Splunk dashboard of the box that I set up with this. That 34,300, that's unique source IPs that hit this box in a 4-hour time. Yeah, it was way more than I thought. And to be clear, that's unique source IP, so that's not, little Billy decided to run an OpenBAS scan against my perimeter and they hit 10,000 connections. That would only be one connection in that box. That's 34,300 unique systems hitting this box in 4 hours. It was way more than I was expecting. It's really hard for you guys to see, but on the right-hand side, that's the countries that they're originating from. Strangely, at that time, the Netherlands was winning. Go Netherlands! But Russia was right behind it, where you expect them to be. Top 100 targeted ports on the bottom. Pretty much what you expect, but this is kind of an interesting little graphic to watch. So 445, duh. 23, 1433. Who knows what 5038 is? That's asterisks. So that's some VoIP fun going on. 80, 3389. What's interesting is starting to watch things grow. You can start to see potentially where new vulnerabilities are coming from or what people are trying to attack. So a few months ago, 2323 was on my top 10. Anyone know what that might have been? That was Mirai. So a lot of popular DVRs were listing on 2323, so that's where they were attacking. So they were just hitting everything. Destinations, so some of the stuff is sanitized because this is actual production. So this is just showing, again, this top 100 sources and what ports they were actually hitting. And again, nothing terribly surprising there, a whole lot of 445. Thank you, WannaCry. But kind of interesting, so we have a fancy next-gen firewall that does some application identification, just to show how cool port spoof is. It's showing that that's SMB, so it looked real to them. SQL, and some of the stuff wasn't quite right, but for someone just doing some very broad attacking, they had no idea. So it's cool. And then geolocation. So here's what the map looks like. I had no idea when I stood this up that it was going to be quite this bad. Apparently everyone is bored on the internet. So I look at that and my first thought is, boy, we need to do some geofencing. So if you do something like this, that's where I would start is, do you need to allow connections to these boxes or to your perimeter from the world? Because as you can see, the world is mean, and you might want to stop that. So what can you do with this? So if you have a fancy schmancy firewall, you might be able to automate some blocking of it. So you know that this stuff is crap. You might want to just plug it in, tell it to block it. I give you a list of MindMeld, or a link here to MindMeld. This is a Palo Alto project, but it's an open source project. And what they do is they take in IOCs from various piles of sources, correlates them, and then spits them out in a way that you can use it. Obviously, they're thinking you're going to put in a dynamic list in the Palo Alto firewall, but you can use it elsewhere. If you do that, be super careful and make sure that you have a beefy enough firewall that can handle that many connections to block if you get the same sort of traffic I have. You might just need to get a little bit more specific as to what you're blocking if you go this route with this, and make sure that this box had to hit 14 different external IPs, not just everything. Or again, do that geofencing to get some of the cruft out of there first. The problem with blocking is, I mean, it's cool, but how hard is it to get a new IP address? AWS is a thing, and it does tell the attacker pretty quickly, or legitimate attackers pretty quickly, that you're onto them, so they can be a little bit more stealthy and quiet. So instead of blocking, what I would recommend is more deception. So this is where we start to get back to finding those active attackers who are really trying to find stuff in your system. So what I do is I build fake sites, put fake stuff out there. So if, say you have a Pulse Secure SSL VPN, formerly Juniper, that's what your users use for VPNing in. Cool. Create a SonicWall VPN landing page as well, and give it the ability to mess with attackers. And I'll go into that a little bit further here in a second. Advanced level, use port spoof, so you detect when someone is playing around. Block all your legitimate sites, but let them still hit all your deception sites. So they don't know that they've just been excluded from your legitimate resources and they're screwing around trying to break into your OWA page that doesn't actually exist for 2 days. Ultra advanced level, and make good friends with your really skilled network engineers to try to pull this one off. But instead of blocking the legitimate sites, actually redirect them to your deception sites. So if your landing page is gateway.neoisf.org and you know that someone is playing around your perimeter, have that source IP get redirected to a fake NEOISF gateway. I never pulled that one off. I wasn't friendly enough with my network engineers. So fake VPN landing page. I meant to put this up on GitHub, but I haven't gotten there yet, so I'll do it eventually. So here's what I built. Simple VPN landing page. I just made it look like a SonicWall. I just went on Shodan and found someone's SonicWall page and cloned it, and put it back into it, where I created a false vulnerability. SonicWall doesn't have this problem, but just have this simple, I give you an invalid username, it pops up and says invalid username, I give you an invalid password, an invalid username, it says invalid password, right? So an attacker can look at it and go, oh, if it says invalid password, I clearly found a legitimate username, I can play with that. Again, SonicWall doesn't have that vulnerability, but I at least proved that one attacker didn't know that. And then, just to have more fun with it, I let them get correct passwords every so often, and just give them an MFA challenge page so they think, woohoo, I got full creds. So what I did with it is I just went out and looked up the average age of the American worker, which is 41 in case you're curious. And then I went and looked at what is the most common first name and last name of people born 41 years ago. And I built a weighted table, a weighted database. So J. Smith is the most common username, if your username's their first initial last name, of the American worker. So when you go to log into this site, do a random true false of whether or not it's going to be a successful username and weight it. So there's like an 80% chance that J. Smith is going to be a valid user when someone tries it. Did the same thing with password. I just grabbed the RockU password dump or password list, filled that in and weighted it. Again, put things like winter 2019 way up the top. And I think like in winter 2019 with J. Smith, you have maybe an 18% chance of that being a full valid username and password combo. To make it look like an attacker who's scripting this is getting somewhere and they're excited. Which again, for your pen testers, if you do like a PCI pen test and you get like a week-long external one and then a week-long internal one, and have them walking in all excited that they have full creds already, just hitting the door, and it's just, it's fun. Okay, so now we have a fake. Oh, one other thing. This is a cool way of giving them a fake username standard. So if your username is first initial last name, make your usernames in this first 2 last 3 or something like that. So they don't even know what your actual usernames are, and there's a good way of feeding that to them as well. But giving them a completely different username standard, so when they start screwing around trying to dump stuff in LinkedIn, for example, and try to figure out who your users are, and they started getting some successes here, they don't even know what your username standard is. You give them something wrong. So here's what it looks like. So we don't have a sonic wall. That doesn't exist. So stupid unknown username. So that's nonsense. Oh, but now they got the invalid password. So Vince McMahon thinks he has a username. He's super excited. And there's the ping identity 2-factor page, and Vince is super excited because he thinks he just found a valid username and password, but he's got nothing. And it gets the security question for the 2-factor that does nothing. So they can type whatever they want, but they're never getting past that because we don't even have ping identity.
How many made these kids come up with an attacker?
No, I didn't. I was trying to keep it lit, legit, you know? But wouldn't that make you feel so much better when you get called in? Like you have to VPN in at 3 in the morning, but at least Vince McMahon's happy for you, right? That'd be cool. All right. So same thing. OWA has actually a legitimate credential harvesting. They don't call it a vulnerability. It's a feature apparently from Microsoft. Anyone who knows, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm right about this. So if you give OWA and other Microsoft services like Link Server and things like that, a legitimate username and an invalid password, there's like a 5 to 15 second delay before it returns an invalid login prompt. If you give it an invalid username and an invalid password, it's instantaneous. So you can do a timing-based attack. And there's tools out there that just do exactly this, just spray usernames and see how long it takes to get that error back. So this is the exact same application, same backend. It uses the same database because my idea was, all right, I figured something out from the sonic wall. I want to go try this on OWA that I also found, and I wanted to get the same results to them. But the only difference here is instead of returning a prompt saying invalid username or invalid password, it just puts a sleep in and waits somewhere between 5 and 15 seconds. This one's fun because you can actually use actual attack tools and fool them. It's just kind of fun to see the attacker tools get used against them. So this is a little outside my scope, but I'm going to go over it anyways because this is an awesome place to use it. Honey Badger is a tool from John Strand. Oh, I have to get my book out. From Black Hills InfoSec, one of my heroes. So by the way, this is an awesome book. It's offensive countermeasures. It's basically just a man page for a whole pile of tools, but it's really cool stuff. If you're interested in this, I totally suggest you get and read it. But what Honey Badger is, it's a little bit of hacking back. And all it is a little Java applet that you try to trick an attacker to run on their system, and it will then tell you, hopefully, based on various public information, tell you where they're located. So it runs a little Java applet, starts looking at MAC addresses of the routers and things like that, stuff that Google Street View has been really nice to populate for everyone and geolocate for everybody. And so if you get to this point, right, where someone is trying to launch a VPN session to your network, you know this is no longer the Croft, right? This is someone who's actually trying to attack you, so you might want to try to figure out who the hell they are. This is a really cool place to do this. I will just say that there are some legal things you want to talk to your legal department about before you just go turn this on. Like you need to give the attacker some benefit of the doubt. You need to give them some banners, letting them know that you're running code on their system and what it's there for. But interestingly, attackers tend to be just as bad as your end users and just like, yeah, cool. So traditionally, one of the problems with Honey Badger is just trying to convince an attacker to run a Java applet in 2019. But in SSL VPN, that's a totally normal thing to see. Like you authenticate to an SSL VPN, it needs to launch a Java applet maybe for a host checker type service or something like that. So it's not out of the ordinary. So this is kind of a cool place to do it. But please talk to your legal department first. Actually, this book has a very good section about how to talk to your legal department about it and what sorts of things you should do to not get arrested. Deceptive metadata. So this is going back, this does a few things, but this is a really great way of feeding them an invalid username format. So you have your website, you have Word docs and PDFs on there, and all that stuff has metadata. One, you should be scrubbing that stuff before you put it on the public internet. There's tools like FOCA that will grab that data and give you a nice list. And there, a Word document can have all sorts of crazy metadata in it. It can have your username, it can have your computer name, so you get computer naming formats. can have application operating system versions. You can have your manager's name, so you can start getting hierarchy information. Great stuff. And how are you going to track that? How are you going to know that someone downloaded this Word doc that's on your public website for bad reasons? Well, one way is to put fake crap in there and watch for them to use it. So fake usernames, and this is a great place to put a fake username format. So again, if your first initial last name, pretend like your username format is first 3 characters and last 6 characters or something like that. And make sure that it has the author name and the username in there so that the attacker can see, okay, that's what your usernames look like. Application OS versions, that's a great thing to fake in there as well. So if you're an Office 365 shop and you're running the latest version of Office, put your application version of this was created in Word 2010. Because if someone's going to start doing some spear phishing and trying to send some malicious Word documents to them, let them think that they're up against the protections or lack of protections in Word 2010 instead of the latest and greatest. Same with OS version. I wouldn't go with XP just because you don't want your customers downloading this stuff going, oh my god. But make it Word 7 if you're Word 20, or if you're Word 7. Make it Windows 7 if you're Windows 10. Things like that. So again, this is really getting down to you definitely know you have problems. Like someone's definitely targeting you. So if you see that fake username, you go and create a fake username that all your Word documents that are on your website have, and you start seeing that being used against your perimeter, you clearly have someone that's messing with you right now, right? They're trying to attack. So I mean, we have, right? We've separated the noise of the internet from a legitimate attacker at this point. Someone has done the standard attacker playbook. They did their OSINT. They got information about your company, and they are attacking you. So for me, if I'm going to have my SSL VPN page up there, and I have mdice as a username in this Word document, that's a successful login. Someone tries that with like Winter 2019, I am definitely letting them in and letting Honey Badger run on them because I want to know who the hell that person is. And this is getting someone at the OSINT phase, and it's not often you can do that. So I think this is super cool. Get to the end here. So spear phishing and credential theft. Another common attack: cloning someone's website, sending them a login, or like cloning your OWA login page or your gateway or whatever it is, sending them an email, your users an email with a link to it, and they provide their credentials. First and foremost, use multi-factor, please, for your external logins. I know it's not an easy sell for some companies, but if someone's going to see your credentials, at least make sure they can't do anything with it unless they get in your building. Canary Tokens, though, again, have this really cool idea where they'll spit out a piece of JavaScript for you to put on your login pages, and you tell what domain you expect this JavaScript to be loaded from. And if they ever see this JavaScript loaded on a different domain, they'll send you an email going, hey, you said this should be from NEOISF.org, this ran from NE0ISF.org, you got problems. So that's kind of cool. The one thing I would say is you might want to consider creating your own, because I would imagine attacker tools that clone websites will probably get wise to this and start looking for that code and ripping it out. So, or at least use some obfuscation techniques, but this is not a hard thing to write, right? This is pretty simple. I just had this idea too the other day, and I put it in here. I was trying to write some code for it, of a browser plugin for an enterprise. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this. So you have your corporate laptop and you have your browser on it, and you put a plugin in it that anytime it sees a login page, it looks at it and says, if compares it to a list of domains that you have SAML behind or OpenID or whatever that's a valid corporate login, and then puts something up on the user's web browser saying this is legit. Or if they go to a login page that is not one of your corporate pages, it just pops up and says, hey, this is not an acceptable place for you to be plugging in your corporate credentials. Where an attacker would have no idea you have that control there, but it'd be a clear way for a user to know that whether or not this is a place where they can put in their login. If you're like me, you've had a lot of problems with marketing departments signing up for every GWiz service that they possibly can, and don't bother running through IT security, and so there's no SAML integration or anything like that, but they're certainly using their corporate credentials for it, so God only knows how many hipsters in San Francisco have your logins. This might be a way of preventing it. I don't know, it may be CRUD too, because I don't know how you get on their personal laptops, but I was thinking about it. Fake news. The Oompa Loompa came back. This is something that I do occasionally. So I have my actual social media accounts and things that I use, and then I have stuff that I make clear are me in the real world. So, you know, put in my LinkedIn page, I work for this company, and then I'll use my name and basically, so if someone does some research and says, well, who's the security guy at this company, they find me, and then it's easy for them to find, you know, my Reddit account or my Twitter account or something like that. And I'll use that to post rubbish on stuff that we don't use. So I have the example of here going to the /r Meraki subreddit from a Meraki customer and just post some stuff occasionally. So that an attacker who's maybe doing some OSINT might think, oh, they're a Meraki shop. Don't have FireEye? Cool. Connect with them on LinkedIn or whatever. Just to make people think, oh, okay, they're a FireEye shop. You know, while they're doing that OSINT, what are we up against? This is the bottom one is probably my favorite. Going on like /r/sysadmin on Reddit and griping about McAfee. You know, if you don't have McAfee, they think, oh, cool. So endpoint protection's out of the mix when we go to attack them. They have McAfee. Don't let them know that you're running something like, I don't know, CrowdStrike or Cylance or Traps or whatever. And make them think that you are way behind the times and you're running some crappy definition-based AV. And it takes no time to do. I'm not saying that make this your whole life, but occasional posting here and there when you're bored might pay off. All right, so just closing up, cat and mouse game continues. Attackers are definitely getting wise to this and getting more stealthy and looking out for it. Javelin Networks, we recently bought Bison Network. They have a PowerShell utility out there called Honeypot Buster, which is supposed to help an attacker detect the presence of honey deception on the systems that they're running on. I mean, this is a little bit anti-competitive. They'll find honeypot stuff from their competitors. But my point being that attackers are up to it. I was at Black Hat this year, and then I went to a presentation from a pen testing firm purely on how to detect deception in an environment and avoid this sort of stuff. What I would say to that, though, is, one, keep up in your game, absolutely. There are some really cool companies out there doing really cool stuff with deception, and I fully recommend you talk to them if you want to, but don't rely on them only, because attackers, just like they have access to your IDS, they can get access to this stuff too and see what it is they're looking for. But yeah, keep on your game, keep doing cool and creative stuff. I mean, if you didn't want to keep learning, you chose the wrong field. You should have been a DBA or an SAP admin. Shots fired, sorry. I used to be a DBA, never an SAP admin. Has anyone else experienced that though? Am I the only one that, like, DBAs, they learned how to administer Oracle 14 years ago and are like, I'm never learning anything again? It's weird. I don't know how you get away with it. All right. So, if you'd like to know more, this book, again, can't recommend enough. Awesome book. If anyone wants to take a look at it while I'm here, feel free. Take a look at the Modern Honeypot Network. It's just a cool little open source way of building out like an enterprise dashboard of administering your honeypots. Black Hills InfoSec has the ADHD project. It's basically a Linux distro full of open source deception techniques. Really cool stuff. If you're wanting money, Binary Defense would love to talk to you. But no, there's a lot of great companies there. If you want to talk to me about them, I could recommend a few. But there are certainly companies out there that are just focused on deception. They're doing some really neat stuff, especially at the endpoint level. Actual processes running your system, doing things like you dump domain admin, the membership of domain admin, and dumping it will display fake usernames there. So modifying the command output, cool stuff. And if you want to talk to me more, I'm here. Hit me up on Twitter. Snorkel42 is my actual Twitter, not my fake Twitter. So feel free to hit me up. And a dad joke. I didn't mention I'm a dad, so I love dad jokes. Any questions? See how long people. Joke grenade. Yeah. It helps to be management. So the question, I don't know if everyone can hear, but the question was how do you get management buy-in, and so that can be tricky. I was lucky. I happened to coordinate it with a red team assessment and said, hey, let me try this and see if the red teams fall for it, and they did, and it was like the first thing to catch them, so it was an easy sell. And one, you just got to build up that faith and trust in you that I'm not going to do something stupid. And again, like I said at the beginning, it has kept me up at night of when I was getting a little bit more cavalier than I probably should. Is there any way they could compromise that and, you know, getting a foothold in my network because I was getting a little bit too excited about this deception crowd? Going once. All right, cool. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming.
We'll take about 3 minutes and stretch your legs and put our next talk on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, are we starting now? Okay, so actually, let me jump over here. Sorry, so my name is Alex. I work at a company called Trusted Sec. You may have heard of us. We work with companies in all sizes, all verticals, everything else. You know, I joke that, there was a couple years ago where I worked with a sole proprietorship where one guy writes the code, takes out the trash, sells the code, et cetera. Then, next week working with the Fortune 5. So you really do just kind of see the gamut. I would say that I'm definitely not smarter than anybody else, but I've seen so many different environments, kind of see what works and what doesn't, and that's one of the ways we're able to provide some value. And then my good friend Dale, who's also one of our partners.
I work for an accounting firm on Maloney and Novotny. Same sort of thing. I see a lot of different industries. I'm a former practitioner turned to accountant. So I used to be in IT, but now I'm actually an accountant. So I see it from two sides. I see it from the money side as well as the technical side.
And a little bit more just about Dale too is that a lot of people talk about or ask about SOC 2s or high trust things like that, and so that's the kind of stuff he actually does. And so somebody that I always trust, who actually kind of understands IT and security, but also does those types of audit things. So probably important to note. So today, we talked a little bit about what we want to talk about, and one of the things is you always hear compliance is not security, compliance is not security, compliance is not security, right? Everybody's heard that, right? But in the end, and the more we think about it, if you look at a lot of organizations, why do they even do security? One of the biggest drivers that you run into is compliance. And and that's whether, we'll get into a little bit, whether that's like contractual compliance or vendor compliance or regulatory or whatever else it might be. So as much as you want to beat up on compliance, it's extremely important, and if used properly, it can be an incredible way to implement a security program or get buy-in.
Yep, the last question, how do you get management's buy-in? Compliance is the way to do it. Like you mentioned, the SOC 1s and the SOC 2s, they're a little bit different type of compliance because, believe it or not, you actually get to come up with your own controls. A lot of it is done through interview. I would salivate to get somebody like you on a SOC 1 or a SOC 2. I could write forever the controls that you have in place. And you want to know the great thing about a SOC 1 and a SOC 2? That's used by sales and goes to every potential customer or customer that you have. You can tie what you do directly to the money. So you want to get management's buy-in, that's a great way to do it. Most of the time, like I said, I'm a former practitioner. I know how I'm sort of viewed in a room of practitioners. But I can be your best friend. I should be your best friend. You should be willing to talk. You should be willing to explain. Using that, you can leverage that into getting the fun toys like Splunk, all those nice little stickers that you had on the back of your laptop. You can use that relationship to build your security program.
And real quick, one housekeeping item, because I know this is being videotaped, probably for the internet, right? So if you're the person that called from LA and is looking for a sample of one of my presentations, this is not the one to use. This is an informal meeting. So keep searching and find one with a suit. Then we're good to go. All right. So.
But
important, right? Okay.
And the whole point of that definition of information security is compliance is the demonstration of what you guys actually do to practice information security. That was sort of what the definition was up there for.
So it's really interesting because, again, one of the things we talk about, like what's one of the most misunderstood words in our industry is governance, right? So what is governance? And people always have trouble defining it. And one of the things that I think it's easiest to remember is if you look at companies that do security well, if they don't, in the absence of compliance drivers, it oftentimes they just got lucky, right? They hired a woman or they hired a man who just happens to be very interested in security, they know what to do, and they got lucky. And a lot of companies just don't have that. And so when you look outside of that, being able to pull the compliance into the governance program is extremely important. The other things that you see all the time, how many times if you're in consulting or if you're internal, how many times do executives come to you and say, hey, I was watching CNN or I was watching Fox or whatever people watch, and I saw this story about this one vulnerability or whatever it is, or somebody got hacked, and that's what drives it, right? And then if you're lucky, strategic direction, right? But how often do you see that? Less often? Yeah, do you have a question? You completely raised your hand. So that's like this, that's awkward. All right.
Common compliance scenarios. How many of you actually answer the questionnaires? How many of you get the questionnaires from your customers or from potential customers and answer them? That's actually compliance. You're actually helping with the compliance. And again, it's something that allows you to directly tie what you're doing to the bottom line. Couple tidbits of information on the vendor questionnaires though. only answer as much as you need to. Don't be as chatty that you give them more fodder than they actually need to answer what they do. And again, it's the demonstration versus the protection. It's the demonstration of what you're actually doing to protect your network. Use those questionnaires to further your own agendas. Because it's one of those things that everyone has to do.
So audit tip. So obviously one of my close friends is an IT auditor. I'm also engaged to an IT auditor, which I always like to point that out during presentations because I was giving a presentation and then afterwards she kept talking to me and I put my arm around her and I was like, oh, I don't really think I'm creepy. I was like, we're actually, right, like we're in a committed, loving relationship. So just FYI, I'm not just randomly. So it's important to know, right? I thought about that. But obviously with any audit, just making sure that we're thorough, we're complete, we're honest, but you just answer the question. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. You give the least amount of information to actually answer the question.
It's interesting, I think, oftentimes also the relationship between internal audit and IT, etc. One of my favorite stories in consulting is sometimes you get credit for doing or saying things that seem pretty obvious. And I remember going out to a client, it's lower in the 500, but in the Fortune 500, and I walked in and they were super excited to see me, and it's not because I'm fun, but they had the audit findings, and they're like, Alex, can you help us decipher these audit findings? I'm like, well, let me see them. And so they're showing me this stuff, and I'm like, well, where does audit sit? They're like, oh, they're on floor 2. And I'm like, why don't we just go up and ask them, right? And that's what we did, and ended up having lunch, and it's actually kind of that so often that they got me an employee badge so I could get the discounted salad bar. But that also stunk because then I couldn't park in visitor parking anymore, and it was like, but anyway. But the point being is communication is obviously super important.
Yeah, it should be a conversation. That's what most of us miss most of the time. Is it should be the beginning of a conversation. It's not an I got you or it should be the beginning of a conversation.
So 2 things, malicious compliance, hear that expression, right? So there are 2 definitions that I hear. One is, being compliant just to be compliant. So we know that this is terrible, it doesn't help anything, we're gonna do it, we got our check mark, we're good to go. Any PCI fans? Any PCI hobbyists? PCI hobbyists, right? Yeah, I'm a QSA, right? It's important to know, it's whatever it is. But I would say I don't want to hear your opinion on PCI unless you've also taken the rigorous day-long class, so an open book test. But one of the things is so there's that, and then there's obviously using compliance to kind of be a jerk. So you're not doing things right, so we're going to use this to have a cudgel to come after you, etc. Meeting the spirit. Did anybody drive here? Not. I looked at Zillow, and the walkability score here is like really low, so I'm assuming we all drove. But it's something that think about it. You drive out here on the highway, and it's 70 miles an hour, right? I'm in compliance. Now this Saturday, when we're getting 6 to 8 inches of snow, I can be in compliance going 68, but I'm probably not safe or secure. Am I right? All right. But the reason I brought up PCI is back in the old days, it used to say what? It said you had to have an application security firewall, right? But what else did it say? Nothing. It could just be sitting there, any, as long as it was there, right? So if you had it and it was sitting there, any, you're good, right? You're compliant. Are you secure? I don't know.
Most frameworks can't keep up with how fast technology actually changes too. So they're a great tool, but they're not a cover-all, as he makes the point.
Do they cover everything?
Absolutely not.
There you go. Anyway, talking about budgets.
Yeah, again, I've said it twice now, I'm going to say it a third time too. It's a great way to get your budget. Again, it's something you can tie directly to the bottom line, especially if your company is selling something. Because I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10 when somebody brings me in for a SOC audit, it's not because they actually wanted to do it, like that strategic direction he was talking about before. It's because somebody is going to become a customer and said, hey, you don't have this and we want you to have it. Again, that's directly tied to sales. You can show exactly what you're doing is bringing in money to the company. And I guarantee you, every salesperson, their first stop is to IT or to security to make sure that they have what the customer is asking for. So again, use that to your advantage. I know most of the time it's seen as a necessary evil, but you might as well use the necessary evil to get the fun toys that you actually want to play with.
So I spent, it took me 9 years to get through college, and I should be a doctor, but I barely have a bachelor's. But the point being is I took up HR classes, and one of the things that really stuck with me was, one of the professors saying that removing a demotivator is not a motivator. So removing something that makes you insecure doesn't make you secure, right? So getting to a baseline or a tear does not make you secure automatically. It's just bringing you up to a general level. The example in HR was always like a dirty bathroom. So if you give your employees a dirty bathroom, it's a demotivator. Cleaning the bathroom is not a motivator. It's just how things ought to be, right? So it's getting you up to a baseline, not making you better.
Compliance-based versus risk-based. As we said before, not every compliance framework has every checkbox that you'll need to check. So it's good to take a look at what you're actually doing to make sure that it's covering the basis that you need it to.
Yep, and again, one of the things that we're always pushing is risk-based security. Because again, everybody has 500 things you got to do, right? You ever see a standard, right? You look at, a lot of these, and some of the things are just there to be there. But really looking at, what's actually important, what your actual risks are. If you look at the risk equation, I could talk for a long time about risk. I won't do that to you. But, if you look at probability, impact, those are two things that I think in our industry we oftentimes miss. We think a lot about the really high impact stuff, even though it's incredibly low probability. I think about, I fly all the time. Sorry, honey, but I'll be home more this year. But, you always, I'm happy to drive to the airport, right? I go 90 miles an hour down 480, not a care in the world, right? Then I get in the plane, and I'm always like terrified. Like, as that plane rotates, I don't care how much I fly, I'm always nervous. And statistically, there's almost no chance that plane's gonna crash. Although now I'm flying next week, and I'm like, with a TSA, who knows what's slipping through there. But
just don't go through Atlanta.
No, people don't drive it. It's Boston though, 11 hours. But one of the things is just thinking about that from a risk-based perspective, right? You can be compliant, whatever, but what are your actual risks?
Again, most of the time it's a checkbox mentality. You do the minimum that you actually need to meet the compliance. You're just making the checkbox. You have the web application firewall or the application firewall that has the any rule. You have the firewall. Are you compliant? Yes. Are you actually doing anything? No.
But if you've done a proper risk assessment, maybe just being compliant is enough, right? Might not make you secure, but it might be enough. The other thing is obviously using compliance to drive your security program. It can be very tough, to get budget or buy-in or whatever expression we want to use. But oftentimes compliance is a great driver. So hey, we want to do this, we want to do that. It's going to make us compliant. It becomes a bottom line issue. I would say that executives oftentimes care about different zeros and ones than we do. So we care about the zeros and ones of code. I mean, I don't as much. I do GRC, let's be honest. But and executives tend to care more about the zeros and ones of dollars. And compliance is oftentimes a very good way to communicate that and get internal budgets.
Yeah, and you always say defense in depth. Just like the previous presentation, there were all those layers that you layered on to catch the people before they're actually doing anything. Use compliance as another one of those layers. It's one you're not going to be able to actually get rid of, so you might as well use it to your advantage.
That last bullet point is yours. I don't remember why we put it there.
Integration into sales. Like I said, most of the time I've seen people be as successful or successful with compliance is they actually integrate it into their sales. The first thing they actually lead with are all of the check boxes that you have checks, all of the things that you can present to your potential customers, to your customers, to show that you are doing what you're doing.
So what is our actual responsibility in our industry? And this is something I think about all the time. I don't know, I mean, occasionally I'll get up in the morning, I'm like, why do we do this anymore? Everything's gonna be breached. We're not gonna have jobs because all the data will have been breached and there'll be nothing to protect anymore, right? But, but if you look at what our actual responsibilities are in the profession, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, contractual, we want to be able to do business, financial availability is what we oftentimes forget, reputation. If you're familiar with, I'm a really big fan of Jack Jones, and, listening to him talk about, it's less about reputational risk, because risk is so complicated, especially to quantify, but it's more reputational damage. But the big one to me is kind of the duty to protect information. And, you start thinking about, I was thinking about my dad. My dad's a smart guy, but I don't want somebody stealing my dad's stuff, online because he's trying to read some story. And so it really does come down to that, even outside of just compliance or contractual obligations, I think that we have an inherent responsibility and duty to help other people and help them protect their data. One final point, it might seem a little bit disjointed, but the other thing I always think about too is types of data. So if you lost your credit card today, do you really care if your credit card gets stolen? I mean, as a QSA, of course I do, right? But in general, what happens? You know, I canceled my credit card just because it was a recurring payment. I didn't want to call. But you press a button, and you know what? The next day it shows up. They FedEx it. You're done. There's not really any liability. But what if you lost your browsing history? Or what if you lost, your texting history? Or what if you, lost all your company secrets and that kind of thing? And so getting into just thinking about those different types of data that we have and we deal with, I think is important.
If you've seen those things now, I don't know if you've seen it. It's the if you have like a medical condition, if you're like knocked out, you can't communicate to them that you have an allergic to antibiotics or something like that. They actually have one now that says delete my browsing history. So if you're ever in trouble and you need somebody to go delete your browsing history, you do that.
It doesn't delete automatically when you close your browser?
No.
So Dale, what's coming? What do you think?
More of the same. We're only going to get more. The second point, cybersecurity insurance is probably going to do the most for audit my industry than anything else has done before. Cybersecurity insurance is just becoming more popular. You're already seeing in the news that they're starting to refuse to be able to refuse people to pay out on the claims that they have made. What that's going to do is it's going to drive them to force you to prove to them that they're actually able to cover you. So like I said, you're going to start seeing a lot more audits come your way because a lot of companies are starting to really take a hold of cybersecurity insurance. Same with a lot of the frameworks that you see, GDPR, California Consumer Privacy Act, the Ohio Safe Harbor Act, which I'm not sure if you've seen, but it can protect you from some tort liability for breaches that you have here in Ohio if you're compliant with some of these frameworks. I'm surprised that there was no audit clause in that because there's no real good way to show that you are compliant with those frameworks to protect yourself from those torts. But as those things evolve, more and more states are going to start coming out with those things, including Ohio. I guarantee you'll see that that's amended at some point to add some teeth to it, to make sure that you're actually being audited to be able to be protected by that law. You're just going to see it more and more.
We could talk about cyber insurance for forever. One of the things that's interesting, and again, I know it's a little bit off topic, but just I actually had a conversation today with somebody. It was Justin, and somebody I've known for 10 years, and it was literally the first time I knew something he didn't, which is interesting. But just about how cyber insurance is really kind of changing in that it used to feel a lot more like life insurance, where there was a defined payout for an event, and now it feels a lot more like medical insurance, where they provide certain services. So you've heard of Breach Coach, so you can do a Breach Coach, or they have certain IR forensic services, etc. It's also funny earlier, the earlier presentation with the tweet. So I haven't actually seen Dave Kennedy speak in the past 6 months, so I had not seen that tweet, but I did watch him eat lunch today. So there's that. So.
No, but take credit for what you guys do. You guys work hard. You guys are the ones that protect everybody's stuff. Take credit for it. When you have the ability, when you have the opportunity to enumerate on the stuff you do, take credit for it. Make sure that what you have is laid out and displayed for everyone to see.
I think we're doing pretty well there, abridged version. I'm actually impressed with this. So this is actually one of my favorite slides. If you've seen me present before, you've probably seen it. It's funny, so I think it's 2 years old. For years, I used to always reference that I went to OU as one of the many colleges I attended. And I remember we'd walk home at night, and there's this one guy that used to live in the next dorm over, and you see him sometimes, and he'd kind of just try every door handle on these parallel park cars. And I'd never figure out what he was doing. And what it turns out was, if the doors were unlocked, he'd take the change of the sunglasses or whatever it was. If the doors were locked, he didn't care. He just move on. He didn't care. And so then this pops up. I live in Chagrin Falls, the next town over, so it's perfect for presentations. I don't know who this criminal is. You're terrible. I hope you get caught, but thank you for the slide. But it's a really good example. If you look at this, that people are going after these unlocked cars. And if the door's locked, they just move on. And so that's a really good, I think, kind of analogy for a lot of what's in the security business. So, what compliance does, does it make you fully secure? No. But oftentimes does it knock back a lot of this stuff? It puts in some things at least, so you can get rid of this and focus more on the determined attackers or other things? I think so.
Absolutely. It gives you a starting point, too.
Yep.
Half the time, the hardest thing to do is to actually start, so it gives you a good starting point.
The other point I always like to say about compliance is that as much as it oftentimes gets beaten up, I've seen a lot of companies in my day, and really, if every company followed, just take one like PCI, they followed the spirit of PCI, did a lot of stuff with PCI, we'd probably be more secure as a world overall. So as much as we like to kid about some of these things, I think that they do a lot of good.
Yeah, like you said, it's all about communication. It's all about starting the conversation.
And along the same vein, so this is like an older article from The Onion. I don't know. I think it's satirical, but I'm not sure. But it's a joke. I covered this. We reused the template, and I covered it up because the presentation I was giving, I didn't know where it was from, and it would be offensive. But it's from a country, right? So some country unable to recruit hackers fast enough to keep up with vulnerabilities in U.S. security systems. And as much as it's a joke, a lot of ways it does feel true. Who's got questions? There'll be some kind of question. Usually I plant questions in the audience, but I didn't get around to it. The Pittsburgh is one of my better things. Yeah?
I'm not your plan, but let's take PCI, so all these major credit card breaches over the years.
Yep.
The companies say they're PCI compliant, but clearly they miss things.
Well, so a couple things, and because it's recorded, I'll measure what I say, but, PCI is interesting, and, there's a lot of different views on it, and I think that one thing, if you look at it, you probably could think about it as something that it's a hedge against regulation. So, hey, we try to police ourselves, we can try to hopefully keep regulations from coming. Another issue I have, and I'm getting to your point, is, I'm a QSA, and if I come out and I assess you, and you don't like what I found, if you don't like the fact that I found you non-compliant, if you don't like the fact that you had findings, what's your option? You get another QSA. Boom, that's it. And there's a whole range, and there are QSAs that'll come out and follow the standard, and they'll be there for a while. I'll work with organizations where they were talking about their PCI audit process, and they'll say, oh, our QSA was here for 2 hours. You're talking about, a retailer with billions of dollars in sales. So a lot of it's what you make of it. PCI is also a point in time. So, very clearly, because you could be compliant today, and then, by the time of the breach, you're non-compliant. The other thing is, you use sampling. It's not completely prescriptive as far as sampling sizes, but it does address it a bit. With sampling, it's always possible to miss. But that's a tough one, because I don't know if it's true, so don't quote me on it, but I know at one time it was that no breached organization had ever been found to have actually been compliant, right? I don't know if that's still true, but that was what was bandied about. So you could certainly, think about that. Did that answer your question at all?
A little bit.
Well, then tell me how to ask it more specifically.
No, I just PCI is just one example, but I feel like all the kind of network that really infosec organizations usually own that the technical parts of compliance programs.
Right.
The time that takes away just to check the box to your point, knowing that they could go above and beyond, but most can't because they don't get budget to do it.
Well, but again, and if you look at a lot of it's, to get good enough and as a liability hedge, and, this is just me speaking as someone that reads news articles, not as someone with any kind of inside knowledge, but I would say that if you look at, the credit card industry, and you're taking some percent, some cents of every single transaction, right? If you're Walmart, it's probably lower. If you're a small retailer, it's bigger. But anywhere from 18 to 27 cents of every single transaction made with a credit card. Plus, you're getting a percent of the entire purchase. Plus, you're getting all that interest on the back end, right? So what do you want to happen? You want those transactions to happen. And so you could secure credit cards and the system's much better, right? But then you would lower use. And so obviously it becomes a risk-based decision, as we discussed. And you start to think about it, if you had to enter a PIN and use your fingerprint every time you swiped, what are you gonna do? I just use cash, right? So it's always a balancing act. And I think that really is a good example of kind of, getting a balance between what's secure and what allows commerce to be conducted, and then finding a middle ground that works from a business perspective. You can go even further and start talking about the liability and how it switches and how it moves around, because that's really what PCI is a liability flow. But now, did that answer your question? Can we get closer? All right, because I could talk for another half hour if you want. All right. Any other questions? So 2 quick plugs. So February 20th, something, is it 28th? So there's a joint ISACA Federal Reserve meeting at the Federal Reserve. If you want to go to that, somebody that I know was speaking for an hour and a half because one of the speakers backed out, so now I'm speaking for an hour and a half. So you can come to that. And then February 11th, please make sure that you're watching Channel 5 at 11 p.m. And I'm not going to say what it's about, but it's very topical for February 14th if you're searching for love online. So we'll have a cool story coming out of that.
Channel 5.
Is that what I said?
ABC.
Is that ABC? I know it's Newsnet 5, which is, I don't know, it was, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's gonna be interesting. So. That's it. Wrapping it up. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
We'll do here. Yeah, not getting blinded by that. It's a theory, man. It's a theory. Yeah, if that's okay. Excellent. Okay, guys, this is going to be a whirlwind. Is everybody ready? This year at CodeMash, a local development conference, not information security, it's very different, there was a CTF. And actually it's been for the last 4 years. Shows how well I'm paying attention. And for the last 3 years, I've been telling myself, you know, I know the guy who started this, I should really do the CTF. And then this year came up, and I was very busy. And I told myself, you know, it opens at the end of December. I should really do the CTF. And I didn't. And then I got to the conference. And I didn't make it into the first session. And I sat down next to someone else who was there that is also here. I'll let him decide if he wants to identify himself. And we started talking a little bit about the CTF. And I went, you know what? I got 3 hours to burn. I'm going to start on the CTF. And I was hooked. And I did as much of it as I possibly could. And I'm going to just real quick do a run through of what it looked like and kind of what my journey was as fast as possible. I'm going to rely on you guys. If there's something that I'm going too fast on and you want more details, please holler, get my attention. If you throw something, make sure it's not too hard, and I'll go into a little bit more depth. Also, afterwards, of course, I'll be around so we can talk about it. But I really am just going to book it through here so that we can get done soon.
Real fast, spoiler alert on this, the CTF is still open for a couple more weeks. So if you want to go and do it yourself without, I don't know if you're going to actually give out the answers or anything, but
all the answers. So yeah, spoilers.
Do it yourself without knowing what's going, the answers to the challenges here.
Absolutely. However, on the flip side, if you don't want to do it yourself, but you felt like I went too fast, didn't include something, or you just forget about it later, there's now at least 3 really good write-ups that you can search for relating to the 2019 CodeMash CTF, and I highly recommend them. I would say something like I'm going to do one, but really at this point I'm just too embarrassed because they're pretty awesome. So you can go ahead and look at those. But this is just my personal journey. And so first step on the journey is I was met with this beautiful CTF page with a list of challenges. Now, when I first started doing this at CodeMash, there were several open already. that had already been opened from the 27th of December on. But there were also some that were still closed. And me being the first time that I was ever doing one of these really, like I said, for 4 years I kept saying I should, I just kind of started off easy because, you know, ASCII art, like how hard can ASCII art be? Oh, and now it's not going to work, but that's right, I've got a backup if it really doesn't want to work. So when I open up the ASCII art challenge, what I was met with, it'll look prettier later. Here. What I was met with, the raw information that I was met with, is this, code match. Now, I don't know how well you can see from back there, but interspersed in here, there's some numbers. Again, spoilers, spoilers all, spoilers. Anybody have any guesses? What are those numbers?
ASCII codes.
They're ASCII codes! I don't think that was actually a guess. I feel like you have done this one before or something. Constantly, right? So, me being me, of course, I extracted those out and got a list of them and wrote a little Python script. If you don't know me, I'm a big Python advocate. There's only one Python, it's Python 3. But this little script went ahead and read that list file, looped over the lines, turned each line that was string into an integer, and then turned that into the character. All that said and done, spoiler, this is what we got out of it. This is what the flags looked like. And this is where I'm going to take a brief moment to mention that while I haven't had broad experience with capture the flags, I have at least had some exposure to them before, and the flags in this one I was particularly pleased with, because all of them were this GUID looking thing. I don't know if anybody knows what GUIDs look like. This is kind of GUID looking, you know, some dashes, 4 characters, that kind of stuff. And they all started with CM19. That was a wonderful help later on, especially for somebody that was new to them, because I could kind of self-identify, yes, that looks like a flag, instead of some of the more hardcore capture the flags where you'd just be slinging anything and everything at the submit box to try and make sure. So props to Hacking Lab who hosted this for doing the flags like that. So that one was pretty easy, right? ASCII art, gotta love ASCII art. Let's see if this is working now. No, of course it's not. Why would it work? That would be too easy. Okay, I really do want to show you guys some of the fancy. So let's see if I can get this working real quick. Maybe. Slowly. There we go. Okay, so that was ASCII art. They all came up with a nice little pop-up like this. Here's what I showed you. Oh, I forgot the description too. I love ASCII art. What about you? And of course, ASCII, uppercase. Littered all throughout this in various forms were those kind of hints, and there were also dedicated hints. You'll see a view hint button down here, and so you could click that and get a hint. I did not do the hints on all of them, so I don't know what some of them are. But continuing forward, we're going to skip a couple here. We'll real quick touch on this. Capture the phalog. The phalog is easy to catch, isn't it? Well, long story short here is you'll notice, especially because I mentioned it twice out loud, phalog is flag in the wrong order. And so we take the raw, we do, oh, here it is, unscramble. We do the ordering, right? And like I mentioned, really liked those flags. They give me a real good idea of what to look for. Keep unscrambling until we get to the end. And then that whole thing, each of these lines, gives us our final flag. So that one's pretty straightforward as well, right? Well, these are the easy ones. So let's get a little bit tougher, right? This was actually one of my favorite ones, busted file. And at this point, I was still pretty high on life. I was having a blast. It was a good time. And so this was the perfect time for me to solve this one. Busted file. Alphabetization is weird. Okay, busted file. I'm going to have to kind of set down the mic and just shout at this point because I do need both my hands for typing, even though I grew up in the 90s. So if we open up a hex editor, some people got that joke. If we open up a hex editor, then I can open up the file that they gave us, bouncing back here, busted file. We can download busted.zip. If I open up the busted.zip, the first thing that caught my eye in particular is the fact that this is a very odd sequence of characters for the beginning of a zip file. In fact, actually, if I know anything about zip files, that sequence should look like this. And in this case, I did. Now, you might not, and that's fine. Wonderfully, we have this thing called Google. You can very quickly discern that. But it did require a little bit of pre-knowledge, right? You have to understand that files have these magic bytes at the beginning that identify the format. And so if you didn't have that, you wouldn't get that. But for me, that was a blast. And I continued on my merry way. Well, if we go and extract the fixed zip, what we end up with is an image. And it says the flag is in this file. Now, because I like audience participation, except for Tyler's not allowed to answer this one because I'm pretty sure he's the one who taught me it, where should I look next? I've got a JPEG. I think you're out of the running too, Mike. Huh? EXIF. Okay, so once again, a little bit more knowledge. If you weren't aware of it, you might have to go digging and try and figure this out. But JPEGs have EXIF information, which is an additional stream of information that's tucked inside of it. Some of the uses of it include things like the focus setting, if you actually took the picture with the digital camera. But you can put tons of information in there. In fact, you can put the X and Y resolution, the software that was used for. Hey, that's funny. What does this look like? A flag! Come on, guys, have fun. So, once again, dump the EXIF data. In this case, I will mention I used a tool. I think it was, actually I should have it here. I used EXIF tool on my Mac in order to dump that information really easily. But then I had the flag. I could submit it and continue forward. You just paste it in the box here, hit submit. Little check box comes, or little check comes up, and I get the points. So that one was probably the highlight of this whole thing. That one's the one that I loved the most because it had a couple of steps, but it wasn't a really heavy lift. It just required a little bit of pre-knowledge, a little bit of understanding of file formats and what that involves. There's a bunch of different ways that you could have cut it. If you really wanted to get fancy, you could have even wrote a quick and easy Python script that ignores those first couple of bytes and opens that stream as a zip archive, even though that wasn't the correct starting bytes for it. If you want to get less fancy with the EXIF data, strings will work just fine as well. You don't have to use a specialized EXIF tool in this case. Strings would dump it out just as easily. But then we start hitting on some of the more involved ones. I'm going to skip Mrs. Robot for the moment. I'm going to go to Espresso. Espresso gave us espresso.class. And yes, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. That's all right. Espresso.class is a Java file, as that pretty little picture tells us. And if we open it up, I can't spell or say it. .class, we'll notice that it's a binary file. Okay, well, Java decompilation is a thing, so we're going to go ahead and run some Java decompilation. And we find this fun little Java chunk of code. And we have to take a couple more steps, right? Now we've got a key and a cipher and some code that we kind of have to sort out. But I mean, because we decompiled it to this, we can just modify the code and recompile it, right? So maybe instead of all that dancing around and the true-false check and whatnot, We just have it run the key and the cipher through its little mechanism and print out the string buffer directly. There's just a little bit of tinkering and whatnot. I'm not in any way good at Java, so don't think that I really knew what I was doing. I basically just brute forced it till I got something that looked kind of right and worked. That's what you do in Java anyways, right? So, long story short, it spit out that flag. Also, the JAD Java decompiler is the one that I used, and there was an online, I don't have it listed here at the moment, there was an online kind of REPL almost for Java that I was able to dump it in and run it directly. And so I didn't have to, pollute my MacBook with Java and whatnot.
It said the actual code read cipher and key. That was, so if that came from decompiling, does that mean that they compiled it like with debug and left it there?
It's Java. That happens anyways. Yeah, no, you can obfuscate it intentionally, but normal compilation of both anything .NET and Java, it includes all that information by default. Today you learned. Aren't you excited? Okay, so that's how I solved that one. And submit the flag, got the points. We're on to some more fun. Nutcracker, as you might intuit by the name, was a similar sort of challenge, but with .NET instead of Java. So that one was fun too. Danger Zone, I don't actually remember what Danger Zone was. What was Danger Zone? Can you enter? Oh, Danger Zone. Danger Zone was a fun one. Can you enter the Danger Zone and find the flag? There is a service listing on blah, 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 5553. This is not about the website Danger Zone. I really meant to go to that website later, but I'm still a little bit nervous. So we're just going to skip that part. Okay. Long story short, I floundered a whole bunch. I threw a whole bunch of tools at it. I was playing with Nmap. I was playing with manual port scans. What else was I doing? I was lots of different options of Nmap, actually. I kept going through different iterations of it, trying to figure out what was up. I ran dig against it because zone, as in possibly a DNS zone, at least that's what I thought. And I kept going at it. AXFR, but I couldn't find the flag. I'm getting these and whatnot. Where is the flag? Well, it turns out, once you get through all that, you realize that, dig, you have to be very specific about the order of arguments, and it has to be AXFR, not AFXR. Real quick slip that, you just have to make sure you type the command correctly, and you get it. And so I started with an Nmap, finally got that right, identified that there was a bind server running on 5553, and then did a zone transfer request, I believe it's called. Somebody that's got better network chops can feel free to correct me, which basically dumped out the content that then I needed for the flag. And I don't know if I've got that floating around in here or not. Up here?
CM 19, line 106.
There. Good eye. Better than me. So there you go. And I believe that's technically part of that one. No, that's its own. So yeah, that's the flag. Type it in. Bob's your uncle. Or danger will. What does it say? Rob.
Danger Will Rob.
Oh, I just got that joke. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. I was just typing flags in. Like, seriously, I was hooked by this thing. You have no idea. I basically spent the rest of the conference attempting to solve it. Crafty Cat was a really annoying one. You should definitely look that up if you're not looking to solve it. Crafty Cat happened to be an RSA implementation. And yeah, I'll let that be an exercise for you. And it was really interesting. The answer ended up being a tool. Really. I mean, if you really knew what you were doing, you could write the code yourself, but the answer ended up just being a tool. Sometimes the right answer to some of this kind of stuff is to use what others have ended up developing, what they've provided, not necessarily trying to go the high road of crafting all your own solutions and whatnot. And there's probably some deeper lesson about software development in there, but I don't know.
The tool didn't work for some of us until later in the week when it got added as a new feature.
Tool and good timing. Okay. Let's see, what else? The parrot. Okay, so I skipped over unicorn here, and that's because the parrot is a similar one. These were particularly fun for me because they had nothing to do with the standard routes that I would have gone. For instance, Parrot here, you'll notice, is a PDF that's password protected. This is the file that we got from it. Well, if you open it up, you know, on any normal program in the Mac, it doesn't say anything. But if you open it up, apparently in some programs, I was later told, you get an information box that gives you some information. I, of course, had to go about the hard way, being ridiculous. Where's the parrot? The parrot. So I ran strings against it, and strings had happened to drop this out. In not retrospect, in looking the other way, hindsight, thank you. I probably could have just opened the file directly. In fact, why don't we try that now? Yep, there we go. So I could just open the file directly. PDF is PostScript. It's an interpreted Turing-complete language. It is insane. You wonder why there's so many exploits. It's because you can write anything you want to in PostScript. But I ran strings against it because I'm me. And then I sorted the strings and I did unique. And then, unfortunately, I don't have it sitting here, but then I did a length comparison and figured out the top 10 longest strings or something like that. And long story short, I found two very interesting things. The first one says, this is not the flag. Good to know. The second one says, Charlie, Romeo, Alpha, Charlie, Kilo, Echo, Romeo, which spells out cracker. Here's where I once again decided to be complicated. PDF cracker. We need a PDF cracker. There's even a program named PDF cracker to crack the password. Anybody got any guesses about what the password could be? Cracker. I'm feeling a little bit better now. I got a couple of other answers, so at least I wasn't, completely off the rails. Yes, the password is cracker. And so in this case, since I had the tool sitting around already, I used QPDF to rip the password off of it, giving me a nice pristine PDF to work with. And then I ended up using a program that I absolutely adore. It's worth the money. It is a paid program if you have to do any vector work, and that is called Affinity Designer. But really, most vector editing programs like Inkscape will let you mess with this stuff in the exact same way. This one's just shiny and pretty and has an awesome logo, and that makes me feel good. Long story short, oh, I need to blow that up some. There's the flag. So you have to hide that layer. And if you're working in other programs, you might just drag it off or something. This is easiest for me. Side note, you'll notice that they did kind of hide it another layer deeper in that this is not text. This is part of the image. And so then you have to do a special operation, which is called decoding with your eyes, and type the flag in. Don't save. Bye-bye, Polly. Okay, 2 more to go. Actually, 3 more. I'll touch on ghost text real quick. Ghost text, pretty much, and I'll go into that. So ghost text gave us a raw text file. What did I call it here? Ghost text. Okay, so ghost text gave us a raw text file, and like a true Linux, Unix noob, I just threw it in less. And I noticed it looked kind of funny. And actually, if I even open it up in VS Code here, where's my ghost text? If I open it up here, it looks fine there, right? It looks fine there, but on command line through less, something interesting happens. I've got all these Unicode characters that are just hiding in there, invisible like ghosts. Haha, the joke. But from here, I got a little stumped because I ran a couple different attempts at some different types of encoding or whatnot, I tried like a pulse type thing, like with electronics, you know, so pulse high, pulse low, that kind of thing. I tried that. Yeah, none of that worked. I tried bit shifting, where I was like, okay, well maybe this is an offset or something, and that's the start, you know, 0, and then whatever the value for capital I and the value for NR. Yeah, none of that worked. And so I finally ended up giving up and looking at the hint, and sure, I'll view it again. And the hint gave me this, which was very interesting because it both gave me a direction to go in and confused the living daylights out of me. You'll notice that it says AA underscore, representing kind of like a space, right? Like if we look at this file, we've got some spaces here. But the problem is what do I do when that underscore is starting it? Because there are no examples of that. So after fighting with that for a while, I just ended up giving up and deciding I was going to ignore that leading one. And then you'll notice that following the hint, A space 01001, at least for my weird developer brain, I went, oh, okay, well this is a 0, and then this is a 0, so 0, 0, and then the space is an OR operation on the previous bit, which means it's a 1, so 0, 1, 0, 0, 1. But that made it fairly trivial for me to then write some code that, once again, is probably overblown. I've seen some examples of code that's much cleaner and neater. First, we turn that sequence that represents the Unicode character into an underscore, because underscore. Then we turn everything else that's not an underscore into an A. I had a lot of fun with this because the way that I read through this, I read it as bytes, which meant that I had to chunk it into 3-byte chunks and check, because the Unicode characters were 3 bytes and the regular characters were 1 byte. And so I ran through after replacing that and did the operation I just described, where when I had an A, I append a 0. When I have an underscore, I go back 1 item in the list, and I OR it, perform an OR operation for that previous item. You'll also notice that this is where I just skipped it and said, hey, if you don't have a previous item in your list, you know, like that first character, just skip over it. And in the end, it worked. Oh, and then I had to, so this is pulled directly from the Python documentation, this grouper. I had to group them together and end up doing basically a binary conversion into bytes that then gave me the ASCII characters, and I got the flag out of it. So technically Cars was the last one released. That one was a lot of fun. Did I mention that tool sometimes is the right answer? Because it's all about SQL injection. And while I can tell you plenty about defending against SQL injection, I would not consider myself worthy of any red team, even sideways glances, because I can't manage to pull off a successful SQL injection against this manually. But good news, there's something called SQL map that you can just run against it and it figures it out and dumps all the information you need. So yay, SQL map, it's actually a really good tool. I would highly recommend that you clone any production databases that you currently have, like clone the whole box on one that's non-production, because this gets scary, and just, you know, run this thing against it a couple of times. And then maybe go to your boss and run this thing against it in front of him a couple of times. And if you want motivation, you can show him just how far script kiddies will go, because it's a little bit scary, and something that's vulnerable in any sort of vulnerable web application or just directly at the database layer, this thing basically harvests everything automatically. Like, I wasn't kidding when I said that I wasn't able to execute a manual SQL injection attack. I wasn't able to. I literally just ran this and got the flag, which was even a very poorly MD5 hashed password, but it automatically cracked it for me as well. And it's got rainbow tables. and it can even crack with salt given enough time. And it just, this tool is amazing. So yeah, highly suggest, go play around if you get a chance, or just find a sample one. That brings me to the last one. I made my way through all of these fairly quickly. Even the last one, even the SQL injection one, I had to use a tool, but you know, I got through it fairly well, except for stacked up. Stacked up, I had to have a significant amount of help. And most of that help just consisted of getting me out of my own head. And I think there's a broader lesson here. So going to information security conferences, coming to NEOISF, I see some pretty amazing stuff from some pretty amazing people. And it kind of poisoned me a little bit, because I thought somehow in my mind that I needed to live up to that. And so to execute this one, you know, obviously, as I was working forward with it, I found out that it was a listening service. When I dumped a whole bunch of stuff at it, sometimes referred to as fuzzing, I noticed at a very specific point, it would just crash instead of echoing back what I had sent it. If you haven't caught on already, that's indicative of a buffer overflow of some kind. And then my brain went into overdrive where I thought, okay, now I've got to use everything that I've learned here. I've got to do a NOP sled. I have to figure out some ROP gadgets. I have to, yeah, it got really silly, because in the end, all you really needed to do was find the proper address, which did rely on a little bit of decompilation of the binary, but I bet my daughter could do it, and she's only 4. No, honestly, like it really wasn't that big of a deal, guys, but you just found the address, and then you just sent the address in proper byte order, but sent the address as the tail end of that buffer overflow. That's it. No gadgets, no sleds. This is turning into a really weird talk, especially with that snow out there. Anyways, you just had to do that, and really the larger lesson here is sometimes it can be a lot of fun to just try something new and try and keep it as simple as possible. Don't build up this huge imagining. I didn't need all this knowledge that I picked up, and I wouldn't have been able to do it anyways, as clearly it took a lot of help at the end of the conference to get me to a very simple point. Padding, address, and I had the flag in 3 seconds. That's the long and short of my experience going through the CodeMash CTF. If you ever get a chance to go through one of these, I highly recommend it. I wouldn't be surprised if there might be no one next year. I don't know whether it'll be open or not. But also Hacking Lab, I think from time to time puts on free ones.
There's free ones, yeah, all the time.
Sweet. So absolutely highly recommend that. It's a fun experience. It got me to use parts of my brain that I hadn't had to use in a while, and unfortunately it got me started using parts of my brain that then engaged the help of others to bring me back down to earth and go, you know, you're kind of overthinking this. Anybody have any questions? Alex!
Did you use your medulla oblongata?
Smidge.
Waterboy?
Anybody else? Alex always has the best questions. I understand why nobody else wants to ask a question. That's cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this entertaining. If you have any questions later on, I'll be probably over there.